Thanks, Michael. I'd like to do two things before I start. It's always good with a group like this to try to have a brief story or a joke or something like that. And so, literally within the last hour, I went onto my Facebook page, and there was a message from somebody that that sounded like it might fit. I blocked it, I copied it, and I went to print it. And then it literally took me 10 minutes for it to come out of the printer because of all the stuff in 704 that was just jamming through the printer. I literally asked for assistance from Mina, and I was amazed to find out that it was not one of her files. But we're still looking for the person. Seriously, it's a story that some of us have heard in the past, maybe others haven't, but that the Supreme Court met in a special session today, and it ruled that there can't be a nativity scene in the Capitol during this Christmas season. This is not for any religious reason. They simply have not been able to find 3 wise men in or near Washington. The rest of the message was that the search for a virgin continues, but there was no problem, however, in finding enough asses to fill the stable. Seriously, I'd like to take a moment to thank my colleagues who've done such a terrific job promoting these Communication Research Center colloquiums, and special thanks, obviously, goes out to Jim Shanahan and to Mina Tsay, but others are involved as well. And over the years that I've been involved one way or another with at least half a dozen university-based research groups such as this, and I found that few, if any, of them were as organized or operate as effectively as this one does. And I think that the work of the CRC clearly is enhancing the position of Boston University and its College of Communication on both the national and international research fronts, and I'm extremely proud to be part of this great effort. I'm excited today to be able to share with you some things about the trend analysis and the longitudinal studies that I've been doing, taking a look at how social and emerging media are used in public relations practice. The things I'd like to accomplish within the next half hour or so, and hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A and some interaction, but I'll provide you with an overview about the social and emerging media. We'll briefly examine what's been written about social and emerging media in the scholarly literature of public relations, take a look at some of the ways social and emerging media have been used effectively and ineffectively in public relations practice, thoroughly discussed the longitudinal analysis trend study research that Michelle Hinson and I have been conducting with hundreds of practicing public relations practitioners over the past 5 or 6 years, comment about how public relations use of social and emerging media is being measured and evaluated, and take a look at how social and emerging media have impacted the process of communication, or what our friends at the Institute for Public Relations like to refer to as the science beneath the art of public relations. I'm just going to take this slide out, but it's always, I think, important when you talk about public relations and anything to make sure people know what public relations is, because unfortunately, even though the last time I checked we were still in the year 2011, there still are people out there who misconstrue public relations with publicity and press agentry and some of the most simplistic forms of public relations practice that have sort of been taking a back seat for the past 50 or 60 years. But our goal in public relations is to initiate or reinforce change in knowledge and opinions and attitudes and behaviors with various important and strategic publics. A little bit too, perhaps, about my experience with the emerging media, that I was one of the first people to conduct research taking a look at how the internet and other emerging technologies were impacting public relations. I wrote a couple of papers that were published by the Institute for Public Relations in 1998 and in 2001. I still like the title of that monograph, the 2001 The Magic Communication Machine, because clearly I think that the emerging technologies have really dramatically. I don't think that they have changed how we practice public relations or any other forms of communications, but they've played a role similar to what you know, the newspaper played when we got into the era of the penny press, and what radio did in the 20s, what television offered us. Not so much when it was introduced in the 40s and early 50s, but when we decided kind of how to use it as a news and communication media in the 1960s. I've authored a number of articles, and presented a variety of juried academic convention papers on some aspects of the new and emerging communication, and this includes this large annual international trend survey that I've been doing with public relations practitioners each year since 2006. My co-author, Michelle Hinson, and I, we had this great idea in 2005 that we'd come up with this questionnaire about the new media, and that we would, it'd be a great study because every year we just, you know, send out the same questionnaire and people would answer the same questions. But of course, there have been dramatic changes all the time. You know, I mean, Facebook, although it was invented and when it's been around since 2004, it really wasn't doing much in 2005, 2006. So we've had to dramatically change some of the questions that we ask. We have about 60 to 70 questions that we ask. There's only like 4 or 5 of them that we've been able to ask every year since we started working on the project. And when I say emerging media or new technologies or any of those terms, we're looking at various social networking websites, looking at microblogs such as Twitter, video sharing options like YouTube, search engine marketing, blogs, electronic forums or message boards, and podcasts. A few little what I call emerging media nuggets that some of you might know, but if you don't, I think it's kind of interesting to talk about these options and these possibilities. But Facebook now has more than 800 million users. More than 300 million of them sign on to Facebook any given day. If Facebook were a country, it would be the world's 3rd largest and twice the size of the United States. Facebook has users in 190 different countries who communicate on Facebook in more than 70 different languages. The average Facebook user has 130 friends, Facebook friends, that people spend over 700 billion minutes per month on Facebook. People interact with more than 900 million objects on Facebook. The average Facebook user is connected to 80 groups, events, and community pages. The average Facebook user creates 90 pieces of content each month. Social networking now accounts for 22% of all the time spent online in the United States. Twitter experienced a 200% growth between 2010 and 2011. We found that its use had a dramatic growth during that period as well in our research. People now spend more than 200 million tweets per day. That's up from 65 million a year and a half ago. About half of these daily tweets are created by only 20% of Twitter's user base, and many of those 20,000 are celebrities, media outlets, organizations, blogs, etc. Some people are concerned that 10% of Twitter's users produce 50% of all the tweets, but that's better than it used to be a couple of years ago when 10% of the users produced 90% of all the tweets. LinkedIn now has 120 million users. Google Plus, you can write that either way, is an invite-only social networking site founded earlier this year. Currently reports to have more than 50 million users and growing. Emerging media currently receive 13% of all advertising spending, which is projected to grow beyond 20% by 2015. 81% of business journalists turn to corporate websites and webinars when looking for story ideas, breaking news, or when they are seeking a corporate spokesperson. Corporate blogs make up only 8% of the blogosphere. More than half of all American adults now get at least some of their news on a cell phone, smartphone, or a tablet, or on a tablet computer. I want to take a sort of a brief look at some of the things that have been written about the social and emerging media in the scholarly literature, and I really need to acknowledge Professor Sandra Dewey, who is She's a former corporate public relations person who went back to school, now teaches at the University of Southwestern Louisiana, and really is becoming kind of the expert on putting together all of the things that have been written about public relations in the social media. And she traces the start of the literature review to a guy named Chet Berger, who was just passed away. Chet was a very noted public relations practitioner. Did a lot of work with the old, the real AT&T back in the old days, and had his own firm in New York. And in 1981, he predicted that new communication technologies would change corporate America in fundamental ways, including lowering communication costs, vanishing paper trails, streamlining communication networks, reducing the frequency of that should be face-to-face communication, and newfound ability to direct messages to specific audiences. Betsy Ann Plank, who was the first woman to be president of PRSA back in the days when being president of that was the chief elective officer, in 1983 warned public relations practitioners to brace yourself for the mixed blessings of immediate reaction to our messages in regard to the instant, sometimes thought-lacking feedback the new technology would allow. And I have to smile when I read that quote because it's such a provocative thing for Betsy to say. And those of you who might have known Betsy, she would never go to a computer. She never had an email address, and I can remember being on various committees and so forth and so on, and it would have everybody's fax numbers, and then it would say, no, it would have everybody's email address, and then it would say, please fax to, Betsy Plank at such and such a number in Chicago. Some studies that have been done the names of the authors might not mean a whole bunch to you, but Ursock and Lifty in 1998 examined how corporate social responsibility was conveyed on websites, and they found that the predominant model was top-down. One of the things that's a little disturbing about the findings that are communicated in the literature review is that although we have this marvelous new form of technology to develop relationships with people and communicate and enhance relationships and so forth and so on, in many cases we're continuing to use it as we use the old media, just in terms of like dumping messages on people and so forth and so on. White and Rahman reported that the trial and error approach to website development was more commonly found than one based on any kind of research planning or evaluation. Bob Heath said that new media offer both opportunities and threats to relationship building, and Coombs described the internet not only as a new weapon for CRS, but also as a potential equalizer that would embrace the power of activists and significantly affect issues management and corporate performance. Taylor, Kent, and White examined how activist organizations were using the internet to build relationships with strategic target audiences. And again, they found that these activists did not fully engage the publics in two-way communication. There's been a lot of interesting stuff that's been done on activist, the use of social and emerging media by activist groups. And a lot of people think that some of the people in the activist groups really don't want to fix the situation, because if they fixed the situation, then the protest would end and they'd have to go home, or it's really some interesting stuff that's in there. Noddy, Freundman, and Atwood, as well as Ortree and Seltzer, reported that activist organizations, including NGOs and advocacy groups, were good at providing information but lacked online interactivity with their publics. Yang and Taylor found that social movements were doing little to activate offline participation. And Zock, Collins, Cisco, and Supa, and yes, that is Dustin, argued that activists were underutilizing the potential of framing techniques on their websites. Kent acknowledged that the potential of blogs, he acknowledged the potential of blogs, but mainly for research framing, persuasion, issue monitoring, and environmental scanning. And there's some other studies in there as well that if anybody would like to get if anybody would like to get a copy of the slides or a little bit more details about these articles, I would be happy to provide them for you. I do want to take a little bit of a look at the problem that seems to appear over and over again in the literature, that although the interactive participatory nature of the web distinguishes it from traditional media, that we're not always taking advantage of those opportunities. Seltzer and Mitroop suggest that blogs are potentially more effective for relationship building than websites because they have this responsive design, but still a lot of people are just using blogs in the same way that they were using website situations. In spite of these potential advantages, a variety of people listed there find that public relations communication within the emerging media to be primarily asymmetrical in nature, lacking dialogic features and lacking a move to the two-way symmetric communication that we would really like to see in our field. When you say two-way symmetrical communication, there's one scholar whose name just automatically goes to the top of the list on that, and that's Jim Brunig, who's a professor emeritus at the University of Maryland, and he's admonished public relations over the years for using emerging media in the same way traditional media have been used for dumping messages on the general population. Brunig also says that for public relations to fully use digital media, practitioners and scholars must reinstitutionalize public relations as a behavioral, strategic management paradigm rather than as a symbolic interactive paradigm. He also says that the new media have the potential to make the profession more global, strategic, two-way, and interactive, symmetrical or dialogical, and socially responsible. In spite of all that, many practitioners are using emerging media in the same ways they use traditional media, as a means of simply disseminating information rather than as a strategic means of interacting with publics. In addition to this long list of studies that have been published within the literature of public relations and communication, research about these topics have been published in scholarly journals in many different academic fields, including anthropology, history, mathematics. I mean, I thought that was a joke until I, did some searching and checked. Political science, psychology, social work, sociology, and the tourism and leisure services. If you Google tourism, leisure services, and social media, you'll find almost 250,000 options to look at. So it's a topic that's of great interest, not just in colleges of communication, but in many other academic fields. I want to take a little brief look, and later we'll take mention a few other projects. But here are some things that have taken place that you might list in the category of effective emerging media use within the past month or two. John Deere's project, Project Can Do, it capitalized upon the interactive potential of social networking by encouraging the company's Facebook followers to donate more than 300,000 cans of food to an Illinois food bank. The campaign was enhanced, or it has enhanced, John Deere's reputation as a company that aims to bring together farmers, the land they work, and communities. Moving to the nonprofit side, the Humane Society of the United States, noted for a lot of effective use of social media, particularly on Facebook and Twitter, now has more than 1 million likes on Facebook, 1.2 million names were added to its email base. They have hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers, and that's all very unusual for an organization whose key demographic is women 55 and older. Ford Motor Company has really made effective use of social media. Ford received 50,000 Facebook likes, 11,000 plus YouTube video views, and had 25,000 potential customers seek individual pricing for specific Ford Explorers on Ford.com. All of that in a single day. Ford's social media activities directly linked to increased sales and productivity, and they recently just they introduced a new car, and it was only available, or information about it was only available on social media for a few days. McCormick, the spice company, it's T-Day turkey. All kinds of people have been offering recipes and so forth and so on to people who are interested in cooking. But McCormick is one of those products that's a little interesting, because if you go into the grocery store and you look for McCormick spices, they're all over the place, but it costs a little bit more than the regular thing. The regular spices do. But by the unique use of social media, offering recipes and cooking tips, complete with photos of turkeys and turkey meals and so forth. And then if the consumers would like the T-Day turkey, they received access to a wide variety of recipes and tips in the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving. McCormick reports strong links between this Facebook activity and sales. So let's take a bit of a look into the things that Michelle and I have found in the studies we've done. Michelle Hinson worked at the Institute for Public Relations for 16 years, and she had an unbelievable knack to get people to do things, including filling out questionnaires and stuff like that. And she's one of the few people I know, and I see Dustin smiling because you know her as well. I mean, you know, if you didn't participate in the study, we don't need to tell the people at IRB this kind of stuff, but you know, she threatened to burn your house down and stuff like that. we got really high responses, and then we actually started. You know, we didn't. This was a trend study. This was not a panel study. In a panel study, you interview the same people, you know, year after year after year after year. In a trend study, you're taking random samples from the same groups of members of the International Public Relations Association, members of PRSA, and so forth and so on. But we would actually get people complaining. You know, are you doing the study again this year? You didn't send me an invitation to participate in it and stuff like that. So that was kind of cool. But every year since 2006, we've been surveying a large number of public relations practitioner respondents. I'm just giving you the numbers for the last 3 years. We're in the field now with our 2012 data. And the reason I'm just looking at this within the last 3 years is because there are a whole bunch of things that as I said, there's 4 or 5 questions we can go back to 2005, 2006 on. But you can see the number of respondents we got. 479 this in 2011, 563 in 2010, 574 in 2009. And albeit those numbers are getting smaller, but of course it's becoming harder and harder to get people to participate. I mean, when we first did this as an online survey, it was like, oh, this was cool. I'm going to go fill. I mean, one year we had something like 800 responses. But for many of them, it was the first time they'd ever experienced doing an online survey. So it's becoming a little bit more difficult to get people to fill them out. But our numbers are still high. I mean, if you take a look, you go through many of the, you go to the IPRSC Public Relations Conference, or you go to ICA or AEJMC or NCA, and you're going to see a lot of papers there that are presented with an N of like 200 or something like that. We're well above that. We're finding an increasing agreement each year suggesting that the emerging communication media have enhanced public relations practice, and the results suggest that this is particularly the case with social media and microblogs. 87% of the practitioners tell us emerging media have changed the way that organizations communicate. That 87% is the 2011 number. It's up from 83% in 2010, 73% in 2009, and 61% in 2008, 58% in 2007. This is one of the few questions that we've been asking for a number of years. And the mean scores in there. The mean scores, of course, to those of us who understand the statistical side of things, the mean scores mean so much more than the percents. But to so much of the practitioner audience, the percents deliver a stronger message. And the mean scores are on 5-point scales, based with 5.0 being the best score, the highest score, the most agreement, the most highest degree of favorability, whatever. The impact remains more pronounced with external rather than internal communications. There's strong agreement that we found, and it increases each year, suggesting that blogs, microblogs, social media, and other emerging communication media complement traditional news media. We're finding strong support indicating emerging media have made communications more instantaneous, which forces organizations to respond more quickly to criticism. And this is a very interesting thing because for many, many years, lawyers were able to impede public relations practice because they were able to say, well, we can't announce that, we can't do this, we can't do that. Now the communications people are working closer with the attorneys as the attorneys realize that there's certain public opinion arena issues that need to be thought through. We have we found strong opinions indicating the new media have a long distance to go before they'll be equal to traditional news media in terms of accuracy, credibility, truth, ethics, and so forth. Don't forget, these are the opinions of public relations practitioners that I'm reporting on. We're finding that blogs and social media do not receive very high scores in terms of truth-telling or advocating transparent and ethical cultures, but our respondents give new media high marks for offering organizations low-cost ways to develop relationships with members of various strategic publics. The time that public relations practitioners are spending working with emerging media is increasing every year. In 2008, in 2011, 7% spent more than half of their time with emerging media, and you can see the rest of the breakdowns there on the slide. Only 3% of the nation's PR practitioners, at least those we surveyed, told us they don't spend any of their working time with the emerging media. This is down from 4% in 2010 and 7% in 2009. There's some very interesting questions about organizational governance and like who's in charge of the social media for an organization. Our results show, now don't forget, we're talking to public relations people, but for our results show that the public relations communication function is now responsible for monitoring and managing emerging media. In 83% of the organizations we surveyed, that's up from 81% a year ago and from 66% in 2009. 94% of our respondents think that public relations or communications, often in an organization, what we would call the public relations function is titled the communication department. So that's why I use the two words together there. Now, research done by others finds that marketing plays a stronger role in organizational governance or of emerging media, so it's something that we continue to watch. How is this emerging media actually being used? In 2009, we found that search engine marketing was considered to be the most important of 7 emerging media options. That changed dramatically in 2010 and 2011 with the increased importance of social networks, especially Facebook, and microblogging sites, especially Twitter, and video sharing options such as YouTube. Social networks are now considered to be the most important emerging media tools in public relations practice, followed by microblogs and video sharing. Each year we also ask how important each of these new media should be, not how important are they, but how important should they be in public relations practice, and our 2011 results indicate that social networks should be the most important, followed by video sharing, search engine marketing, and microblogging. So we have meaningful gaps between what is happening and what our respondents tell us should be happening in terms of social media use in the practice of public relations. We also asked how frequently public relations people use various emerging media options as information sources for news about what's happening at the local, national, and international scene. And each year that we first asked that question, we first asked that question in 2009. In 2009, our PR practitioner respondents told us they got most of their news from newspapers. Now, the public relations audience is going to be a little bit different than the general population, but we're still interested in where they're getting this news from. Social networks moved into second place with this question in 2011, followed by magazines, TV news, and radio news. Although the microblogs, such as Twitter, their use is increasing, it's still in a fairly distant sixth place. And we asked how our public relations subjects use media for information about what's happening in public relations, such as trade publications. They were the most frequently used media through 2009, but were replaced in 2010 and 2011 by blogs, social networking sites, and microblogs. Results show that the PR practitioners are more likely to read online versions than print versions of newspapers and magazines and newspapers. It wasn't always that way, but that's what's happening. That we also asked how frequently our subjects access various new media services. Far and away, in both 2010 and 2011, Facebook was accessed the most, followed by Twitter and YouTube. LinkedIn use increased dramatically between 2010 and 2011. Each year we conduct a variety of analyses in an attempt to check for demographic differences based upon age, gender, geographical location, and the kind of organization respondents work for. The greatest number of statistically significant demographic differences we find are based upon age. Younger respondents were considerably more likely than older ones to not only advocate greater use of social media and public relations, but also to use social media and other internet-based technologies in their daily searches for news and information. We find that women, the women who have participated in our study also tend to be more adept at using the emerging media than men. But when age is the variable, it's very clear and very statistically significant. When it's not as significant when you're examining just based on gender, since our male respondents tend to be older than our female respondents, we suspect it's more at age than it is at gender. Since research is such an integral part of public relations, all of our annual trend studies have asked questions about social and emerging media measurement. And even though PR practitioners say that research and measurement and evaluation are important, few of our annual subjects have claimed to be actually conducting this kind of research. Although the numbers are still embarrassingly small, the percentage of those conducting emerging media measurement has been increasing each year. In 2010, 25% of our respondent organizations claimed to be measuring information employees communicated on blogs or social media. In 2011, 42% of these organizations claimed to be measuring what members of other strategic publics have communicated about their organizations via blogs or other social media. Although fewer than half of our respondents actually are measuring the impact of emerging media communication, almost all of them tell us they think they should be conducting that research. The subjects in our studies also strongly recommend the use of outcome measures as opposed to output measures, but unfortunately there's a considerable gap between the kinds of research and measurement that the subjects say we should be doing and what's actually going on. Most of our respondents, whose organizations are involved in new media measurement, tell us more measurement is taking place in terms of outputs communicated than about the impact of information being disseminated is having on influential opinion leaders, members of strategic audiences, and so forth. Okay, just to kind of wrap this up a little bit and go to some questions, a quick look at some other areas where organizations that have effectively used social media. The U.S. Army, in a campaign that they worked on with Weber Shandwick, one of the larger public relations firms. The Army Strong campaign that included the first official soldier blog for sharing unfiltered views of military life. This blog now received more than 1 million visits each year. Volkswagen, working in conjunction with the MWW Group, a new media campaign that made the VW GTI the world's first car launched exclusively on a mobile device. The campaign involved no paid advertising. There were 1.5 million downloads of the mobile telephone app, and that led to an 80% jump in test drives of the vehicle. The Coca-Cola Company's Expedition 2006 campaign that effectively used social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Flickr, to follow 3 young people on a mission to make people happy in the 206 countries and territories where Coca-Cola is sold. Newell Rubbermaid's efforts with its Sharpie brand on Facebook that currently has 1.5 million fans. Burger King's Order Taking Chicken, Procter & Gamble's Old Spice Guy. Some other effective campaigns, increasing, the word increasing should not be there. It's Target letting its Facebook fans decide where to donate $1 million. Kohl's giving $10 million to schools through Facebook. The Facebook event that unveiled the 2011 Ford Explorer. Microsoft's Facebook page for Bing's campaign that bought them 500,000 fans. Jack in the Box, which is a hamburger type stand on the West Coast, donating a nickel for every new Facebook fan. Southwest Airlines partnering with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Corona, which most of you know is beer, a Facebook campaign to become the most liked beer in America. Papa John's Pizza Facebook promotion for Papa's Specialty Pizza Contest. The Feeding America Facebook campaign by Kellogg's that emphasized nutrition, and Domino's Pizza's use of Facebook to revamp its brand image, particularly after a couple of now former employees created a video that was rather damaging to the company, and they put it on YouTube. Now, in addition to all the good stuff, there is, of course, going to be some ineffective things that happen. I only have one page of those, but LeBron James' misuse of Twitter in his attempts to capitalize on the speculation that he may move from Cleveland to Miami. General Electric ineffective use of Twitter to explain why it wasn't paying taxes. BP's response to the Gulf of Mexico oil spill. Cisco's head from accounting videos. Charmin's Facebook presence. CBS's community manager having a blocked Twitter account. Denny's accidentally pointing customers to a Taiwanese boy's abandoned Twitter account on the back of its menus. Nestle's fights with Greenpeace. Price Chopper, which is a grocery store chain, complaining to a customer's boss after the customer criticized the chain on Twitter. Mercedes criticized for requiring users to like the brand on Facebook before they could learn about an upcoming Twitter campaign. The final thing, and this is my last slide, but the final thing that we're looking at in this research is how the emerging and social media are impacting communication theory, or the communication process, or what we like to call the science beneath the art of public relations, because they're having a huge impact on this. They have completely empowered and dramatically changed the role of the receiver in many of the traditional, sender message receiver models. They've had a huge impact on altering agenda setting theory, where theoretically the news media would decide this is more important than that, and you'll still see strong elements of agenda setting theory in the media. In the sports pages, you'll still see more about football, men playing football, than you're going to see about women playing volleyball. But if you happen to be part of a family where there's a woman in the family who plays volleyball, you can get all the information you want online without even having to subscribe to the newspaper or reading its sports page. Other elements of impact, I think that the social and emerging media have dramatically altered some of the interpretations of cognitive dissonance theory, particularly in terms of having audiences seek out information that's consonant with their own views. The instantaneous nature of microblogs, such as Twitter and social media, changing the relationships between public relations practitioners and attorneys. I touched on that briefly a few minutes ago. And then I just think it's an understatement to say that the social and emerging media are having a huge impact on what I call the arena of public opinion. I get very upset when I hear people talk about the court of public opinion, because I don't think there is one. I think that the word court, as in court of law, implies that both sides of the story will get to be told. I mean, even if a person is the most despicable axe murderer of all time, he or she gets a chance to have that day in court. That does not happen in public opinion, which is which is why I think we should refer to it as the arena of public opinion rather than a court of public opinion. And the rules of operation and so forth and so on in an arena are quite different than the rules in a court. So that's sort of a brief look at some of the things that I've been doing in terms of research with social and emerging media. And we have a little bit of time left, so if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain. John?
I have two questions. You talked about opinions regarding accuracy, credibility, etc. Are there demographic differences? Like, do younger people give more credibility to social media, or are they more cynical?
There's two answers to that. The answer is yes. We find that the younger people give more credibility to the social media, but it's the statistical significance is not really there, so we can't report it as being something that's all that significant. The other thing is that a lot of younger people are not using the traditional media, so that you don't know how much that answer is a true answer, or if it's, well, since I don't subscribe to the newspaper and I only use my television for this, I'm going to consider it might be the socially acceptable thing to do, because you don't want to admit that the only media that you're using for information is a non-credible one. So that there's some, we do have a little bit of concerns about that.
My other question was, what I've been finding talking to advertising people is that the lines are becoming so blurred now because of social media. Everybody's using it, and I've had people, to kind of paraphrase 4 CEOs of advertising agencies, we look at it as marketing communications now. It's all come together, and we're all sitting side by side. Do you find that?
Yeah. And well, it depends. Basically, we do, it's in some organizations it's referred to as integrated marketing communications, and some it's referred to as communications. There are I think some very interesting things that are happening. I think that what is really significant is that some of the major shifts at the highest element of the executive level, we're now seeing communications experts taking over jobs where they are senior vice president of marketing and communication for the XYZ Corporation or something like that. And a good example of that is John Awada at IBM, who our students had come speak at the public relations, the terrific public relations conference they put on every February. He was here last year. There are a number of other people if the social media is handled too far down in the organization, then it becomes more of a sort of a technique and a tool, and it's not something that can be used to help drive organizational decision making. I mean, I think that there's a variety of things. There's a variety of things that we have to look at in terms of what is public relations, and obviously, I mean, I have a strong bias in terms of my relationship with Harold Burson, and I'm deeply honored to be in the endowed chair that has his name. But I've said to people before that for some reason I still don't understand. Harold put his arm around me many years ago and hasn't let go yet, and so I admire the guy. But one of the most dramatic speeches he's ever given is a speech where he talks about how our field has changed during the now 60 years that he's been in the business, and he says when right after World War II, when he was first hired, he was hired by organizations to help answer the question, how should we say it? The decision about what to do, how to do it, and even what to say had been made by others, and we were brought in solely to be the wordsmiths and to create the message. We did a good job with that, so they let us move a little bit up the scale. They still kept us out of the meetings where the decisions were made about what to do and how to do it, but we were involved in what to say and how to say it. And now, in the most successful organizations today, that you'll find that the corporate communications departments are involved in the decision of what to do and how to do it, in addition to what to say and what to say it. And if they aren't, they have names like Enron and Global Crossing and Tyco and there's Arthur Andersen, and there's a tremendous amount of really interesting things. I mean, Arthur Andersen, 3 years before going down, they reshuffled their executive level appointments and no longer had the communications function reporting to the CEO. We can't say that's why they are no more, but it's really interesting that the companies that have become the most successful, I mean, look at the Detroit companies and the turnaround, the stuff that's going on with GM, the stuff that's going on with Ford, all companies that are set up in such a way where people care about the kinds of things we teach in this building, and communication experts having a real say as part of the dominant coalition or the decision-making arm of the organization. Jim?
This might, excuse me, this might be opinion too, but for the college that would be trying to stay ahead of the curve in educating today's students and whatever public relations would look like, do you have any ideas about how the curriculum would have to change for them?
Well, I mean, we do have a course in social media that in social media and public relations, new media and public relations that Steve Quigley has done such a terrific job of developing and teaching, and it's clearly one of our more popular courses. But part of the issue here is that I think we want to be really careful to not teach public relations just so that it only works in a social or emerging media situation, because there's certain situations when that's a perfect way to go, and there's other situations when that might not be. With our graduate program, we're currently involved in taking a hard look at what courses we teach, what are the components of those courses, and so forth and so on. It's been obviously slowed down a little bit because one of our colleagues is on a sabbatical and the other's on medical leave, so we haven't been able to move as quickly as we might like to do that. I just say I think it's a good question that we're taking a look at and we're trying to answer. Tom?
I wonder, and I may not have understood exactly, but the question of the difference between output and outcome, measuring the difference. It's very easy to throw a million tweets out there, but the question is, will it change anybody's mind?
Right.
Change their behavior. One of the things that I'm always fascinated by is the political decision-making process. What causes a person to decide, I'm going to vote for this person instead of that person, or vote for this issue and not that issue, and where does that process take place? One of the really interesting studies, and I'm sure all of you've studied this, is the 1948, I think it was the Elmira study. Actually, the study was done in the 50s, but it was about the 1948 election.
Right.
They tried to see if they could find a place. This was Lazarsfeld and
Cass and Lazarsfeld.
Yes, okay, you know the study. And what they tried to find a place where they thought this would be like the test tube of America. This would be where
Erie County, Ohio, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, and there was that too. But anyway, they studied Elmira, and then they tried to say what are all the things that go into a person's mind when they try to make a decision. They were looking at the Dewey and Truman race then. And ultimately, I think what they concluded is that the single most important driver of a person making up their mind is essentially the conversation that person has with people in their social group. It's not what the newspaper endorsed or what they heard in the media. It was what the conversation that a man may have had with his barber, and if he liked his barber, he would agree with it, or over the back fence. So it really came down to a one-to-one. If I admire the person that I spoke with, I'm more apt to then take that person's opinion. So it's a long way of asking a question. In public relations, where you're trying to influence a decision, I guess the perfect situation is to recreate a one-to-one conversation where the person who is trying to influence has integrity. And the example, it seems to me, that gets closest to it, and you didn't touch on it, and I wonder why, is text messages.
Yeah.
Because text messages are only from people who have your cell phone number So theoretically, they are truly your friends, not just your Facebook friends and others. And I'm wondering about the effectiveness there. The one example that seems to have gotten a lot of attention in politics is the way Barack Obama announced his vice presidential pick in 2008 was through a text message. People who had given their cell phone number to the Obama campaign, and in return for that, they learned that Joe Biden would be his running mate before the news media did, which was a blow to the news media, I think, and with broad ramifications there, but also says something about that impact of one-on-one communication.
Yeah, we haven't looked at text messaging, in part, and we probably should consider doing that, but then we have to start with that data. We couldn't go back farther in that data. There's a couple of interesting things though that we do have. One of the things I always do in a questionnaire is my last question is, please feel free to tell us any other things, and when you're getting responses, 500-600 people responding to your questionnaires, you're going to find that 120 or 30 of them are going to tell you something, and some of them write a book in that stuff. And what we're finding about is that one of the things about going out to friends, if you will, on Facebook and so forth and so on, is it doesn't cost the friend any money. But a text message often does cost somebody money, so you have to be really careful. It's kind of like, if you have a landline at home and the phone rings in the evening and you answer the phone, and somebody's trying to sell you something or get you to vote for a political candidate or so forth and so on, that usually does not cost you any money answering that phone. It might interrupt your evening meal, or it might interrupt what you were doing, and there's that anger and that problem, but it doesn't cost you money. But if they call you on a cell phone, and more than half the people who have cell phones are on plans where it's sort of metered, and you're paying per call or per minute or some such thing, then something like the Obama thing works, because these are people who have given their numbers, to the Obama campaign. By the way, I mean, the Obama campaign use of social media in the 2008 election was absolutely phenomenal. I probably should have had some stuff up there about it, but that's a very good point. We still believe that you can cultivate relationships, through Facebook and Twitter and some of these other things. But the one-on-one stuff is something that probably needs to be considered. I'm a little aware of the time. I realize it's 4:30 and that people might have other things to do. So maybe we should bring this to a close, but I'd be happy to hang around and answer any other one-on-one questions if anybody